more about the culture. So you talked a little bit about the thin blue line, and I have a good friend. Her name is Cynthia Jackson. She's been out protesting. She's a dynamic, fierce, wonderful woman of God too. And I asked her if she had any questions, and that I could ask you. And her question was, are police, like you say, the thin blue line, are they reluctant to report each other when they see misconduct? And if they did, is there retribution? Do they face some type of, something in the system or something with other police officers if they were to report another officer for misconduct?
Okay. No officers aren't afraid, but I would say that there is sometimes a reluctance, period. Let me hit pause there.
Okay.
I did 32 and a half years on the job. I'd say probably my first 12 to 14, we used to have this thing called the rack. And if there was any type of disagreement regarding anything that happened out in the field, we'll use, say, an excessive force situation, since that's what we're talking about, or anything that was not anything that was not reasonable and necessary in a use of force situation, then you would bring it up to that officer. And if that officer was adamant about, hey, that's just the way things are, or that's the way I do police work, then you take it to the rack. And basically the rack was the wash rack. You take off your badge, your Sam Brown, and you knuckle up and resolve it.
Wow.
So it didn't have to go administrative.
Okay. So
now, unfortunately, you can't do that now. But again, I'm a little bit more old school, but you can't do that now for the varying reasons. But with that being said, there was. You have to understand, just like if something in your house with you and your family, if something wasn't right in your house, you close and lock the doors, you draw the shades, and you address it so that the public doesn't know about it, and you don't eat your own, per se, if you understand what I'm saying.
I understand perfectly what you're saying, because if something was going on in my house or in my family, we would absolutely try to keep it in the family and try to straighten it out in the family. That said, the difference between that is obviously the weapons you guys are allowed to carry and use. So there are some things that I imagine can be settled. And I'm for a good fist of cuffs.
Wait. When you said the difference in the weapons that we use, I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying in my family, when there's a disagreement, no one has guns and no one has a baton and no one has, you know what I'm saying? So
you got knives and baseball bats and.
Okay. You don't have a right or a license to use them.
Okay.
That said, I'm saying that I understand how things are handled in family. And like I said, I appreciate a good fisticuffs. If you're talking to your brother and you guys take it to the rack, as you say, or as you used to do. But is there a point where the behavior is so destructive that it can't be handled in-house, that it has to become administrative because this officer needs to not be an officer anymore?
Yeah, and it's addressed. It's handled. It's addressed that way.
So what is the thin blue line then?
Well, the thin blue line, that term basically comes between lawlessness, predators, and those that don't care about the sanctity of life. The thin blue line stands between them and the community. Now, there's a thing that you may be thinking about as far as code of silence. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
There a code of silence. I know. And I'm sorry, tell me again, when did you retire?
I retired April 29th, which was the anniversary of the riots, 2019.
Oh, so you didn't retire that long ago?
Just a little over a year.
Okay, so the culture is still probably very much the same. So you're saying they don't do the rack anymore?
No. That stopped.
That when things happen,
decades ago.
If there was an extreme situation, like I said, I'm sure the first way to handle it is you guys try to handle it internally, brother to brother, brother to sister, however. Right. But is there a reluctance from officer? And and I can understand this. If I had a friend, somebody I was working with, to report them administratively to end their career would be a hard move for me. Now, I hope that I would do the right thing and make it. But is there a reluctance for officers in cases where they see, another officer is extreme, that they could possibly get someone murdered, to report them and have them not be a police officer anymore? And let me finish that thought with, when I looked at, and I got to find the name of the officer who was doing the chokehold on George Floyd, there were,
I think his name is Chauvin.
Okay, there were past reports about him on misconduct. So I almost feel like, I do feel like, if somebody had done something back then, and I don't know if now we're bringing in unions, if somebody had done something back then, he wouldn't have been in a position to misuse force, and George Floyd would still be alive. But so I know that I asked you two questions. So the first question.
Well, let me say this regarding Chauvin real quick. There were I think 16 or 17 internal complaints. 9 of them I think came from fellow officers.
Wow.
So at that point in time, you remove the onus from the frontline guys, like what we're talking about, and that's on management. That's on supervision and management.
Why do you think that officer wasn't removed?
I can't say. I'm not going to speculate. But now to answer the other question, when I was working and we had what we called quote unquote a problem child on my watch, and the senior officers would get together and say, hey, what's the best way that this can be handled? And we come up with a legitimate, viable way. And usually the way is let supervisor know that we have a good rapport with. They say, hey, this person is causing a problem for the watch. This person is going to end up getting into some kind of, bag of boo-boo, and it's going to look bad for the watch, and it's going to look bad for you as a supervisor. You need to go to the lieutenant and the captain and have him go to another watch, have him work inside or work the front desk or something like that, so that it doesn't evolve into a George Floyd situation.
Well, completely removed.
Huh?
Why wouldn't he be completely removed versus?
Well, in a scenario like that, because understand, I'm working the watch. So if I see him starting to cross the line of excessiveness, then, I'm going to address it. I'm going to stop the person. Then if I see it happen again, okay, I'm going to stop the person. Now I'm going to go to the senior officers, and we're going to, basically develop a plan and go to a supervisor and give the reasons why this person needs to work inside. And at that point in time, whether it's the lieutenant or the training sergeant or the captain, that this individual needs more training, whatever the case may be, then there's an opportunity for that individual to, say, okay, I know why I'm no longer out in the field. I need to check myself. If they put him back out in the field after training and he's still doing the same thing, then unfortunately he's going to, do something stupid, and it's going to be a black eye on the department, and it's going to be a black eye on law enforcement, and then he'll lose his job. But, you have to understand that there are certain needed protections within, the law enforcement community as far as protecting officers and protecting their jobs to a certain extent. You commit a felony, you're arrested, and you're found guilty. Yeah, you lose your job. You violate department policy, or you lose your job and you go to jail. You violate department policy and it's severe, then you're going to lose your job. So,
because you're going further, and I want to ask you this, because I understand you didn't want to speculate on this particular case with this particular officer and George Floyd, but you understand the culture. You policed for 32 years. Just in general, if there's a situation where there's an officer where other officers have reported this officer, as well as citizens filed complaints against this officer, why would a certain officer, what would happen or what would fail to happen in sort of the chain of events where that officer would not be removed from duty? What could happen? Why wouldn't that officer be removed?
In LAPD, because I can't speak for Minneapolis, I don't know what their deployment is like. I don't know what their needs are. But within LAPD, that officer would get what we call benched. And he'd be assigned either working the front desk, or he'd be assigned community relations. He'd be assigned somewhere where he's not working in an enforcement capacity.
For how long?
For however long is necessary.
So it would be about an immediate punishment, not removal. And then because it seems like in this scenario, even though I understand you're trying to discipline in-house, but if he's put out into the streets again and he's still the same man, you could in effect have what happened with Floyd. You could still have that unless he's completely removed from the force.
Well, yes, you could. Who's that? Is that
I'm
you?
sorry. Okay, go on.
Okay. Yes, I mean, when you're benched, you know exactly why you're benched. You have a conversation with your captain, with your lieutenant. You know why you're taken out of the field. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So you have a choice to make a change.
Okay.
So it's like you can't have a knee-jerk reaction to one offense. And I'm not talking about something like George Floyd. George Floyd, there's something that led up to that, and there's more information regarding George Floyd that we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. But when an officer makes a mistake, you can't immediately judge and say that was malicious because you don't know what's going on in his heart and his mind. You bring it to his attention. Then if he makes the same mistake again, then it's okay. Is this a training issue, or is this a bias, or or is this malicious intent? Is there an agenda there? Mm-hmm. Either or, you pull him out of the field.
And let me ask you, since you said that, have you ever seen that change somebody's behavior, make them a better officer?
Yeah. In the field? Lots of officers.
Okay.
There's some officers that have no sense of implied or implicit bias. There's some officers that have no sense of prejudice. There's some officers that aren't racist, but there are officers that are extreme in everything they do. And you have to learn how to operate and dial it up and dial it back. So when an officer, and there's quite a few officers that I've run across that they were extreme in everything they do, then they're taken out of the field, they're given training, and they realize the error of their ways, and they realize that they have to make an adjustment if they want to keep this job.
Okay, so a few more questions and then I'm going to let you go.
You're going to have to hurry up. My Metamucil's kicking in.
Okay. I'm going to come back with the other men that you talked about with the programs. And because I think...
Oh, wait. Can I say this much?
Yes.
Is it okay? And regarding the Floyd situation, there's some facts that I don't know if people are talking about. Mm-hmm. And when I say facts is that Floyd and this officer had a prior relationship because they worked security at a club before.
I read that. I didn't know because of conflicting
things. So you don't know if there was any prior bad blood. At least the people out here don't know. I'm pretty sure the investigators and the DA, they're doing their darndest to build their case. So it appeared that he had no regard to his reckless actions at that time. And most officers aren't going to do what that officer did. I'd say 99.9% of officers aren't going to do exactly what that officer did. So with that being said, and the reason why I say most officers won't, even though you can cite all these other cases, is that there was a blatant disregard in that situation that it was obvious to all law enforcement. And then later on, you find out that they had worked together at a nightclub before, and that Floyd had brought to his attention that he was being heavy-handed with some of the patrons at this nightclub. So we don't know the whole story yet, but you can't yet let that situation be the poster child for police brutality.
It would almost seem, murder one, it would almost seem premeditated if we had, an anger or vengeance or bitterness toward this man even before he came to, question him about, I think it was a forged check or something like that, or
yes, it was some type of forgery or counterfeit bill. I don't know, but my point in saying that was that you can't use that scenario as you can't. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What'd you say?
I'm saying to me that would make it worse. So then
you can make it worse. But the point that I wanted to bring out, you can't let that situation, that Floyd situation, be the poster child for all of police excessive force or all of brutality.
Elijah McCain, it was very similar to me. It's still the same situation. It's still a hold. It's cutting off somebody's blood supply. It's cutting off somebody's air. And it's done to a black man and then a younger black man, because I think that there is an inherent fear of black skin. Now, I don't think that all police officers feel that way. We talked about racism and bias, but clearly there is something there. Okay, but I know.
What causes fear?
I don't understand the fear of Black people.
Well, just in general, what causes fear?
Ignorance.
Bingo. Bingo.
So then that brings us back to what we were saying, and I feel like you answered it, but I want to understand more. When you were in the force, you brought people into communities that they were going to police to make them familiar with the communities. Is that what you've done in your absence?
I don't think it has been as much. I believe that it has been done through the community service police. See, I think it was called CSP over in Southeast Division. Okay. The bridges and the rapport and the relationships that are being developed over there are phenomenal, and the changes that are being made there that are phenomenal, and they're changing the cultures. I mean, I was the quote unquote chaplain for the team the last few years, and what brought a smile to my face was that I would see all these parents who are, lived in these varying neighborhoods, some of them gang members from different gangs. All of these people would come together to support this team at their games, and there was no gang lines drawn. It was like, hey, your son plays with my son on the Watts Rams. You cool with me? Which created conversation and dialogue.
Okay, so which brings me to my last question. Reform and defund. So what you're telling me, because you and I had this conversation earlier, every state has different policies in terms of what they allow their police officers to do. And next time you come back, we can talk about the incident at Wendy's. But what you do, okay, so first of all, what do you think of defund the police? What are your thoughts?
When you say defund the police, what I think is if you're going to stop officers from having to be social workers, counselors, and put money, maybe take some money away from the overtime and put it towards some of these entities that should be doing the work, to where officers can do their job, then I'm cool with that. But if you're going to say, but if you're going to defund the police as a knee-jerk reaction, so we're going to take money from away from the police and spank their hand, then no, that's not going to work. That's going to create a very volatile situation.
Well, we both know the government doesn't move that fast. The city councils have to vote. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. And I do think it is a knee-jerk reaction because of the pain and horror of what we've seen on video, which is horrific. That said, I understand defund the police. I don't understand how defunding the police changes a person's heart, changes what happened to George Floyd, changes what happened to Breonna Taylor. Those crimes, to me, those murders would still exist, even if we don't, if we don't fund the police or have social workers come in, so the police aren't dealing with, your crazy aunt on the lawn running around in her underwear. Okay, so, but that still to me doesn't change the use of force and who it's used on. So I get the movement, but I don't understand it. I'm more for reform because I think that the 8 points that Sterling talked about, the chokehold, I forgot what he called it, the something continuum. Are you familiar with it?
Training continuum?
Yes. How much force is used based on the activity that is going on. I think that, as we said in the beginning, could actually change behavior. No one can change your heart, save Christ. But behavior can be changed, or there can be an accountability for bad behavior. And I forgot to ask you that. So I've always
let's see, you have me for a few more minutes.
Okay. So I've always said when it came to police misconduct that the DA shouldn't be the one to charge them, because the DA is somebody you guys work with, right, to bring criminals to justice. So how can my friend then prosecute me? This, is problematic. So I always felt like a special.
There have been a lot of officers prosecuted by the DA that would not agree with you, but continue.
Okay. So do you think the DA is capable of being unbiased, or do you think a special DA, a special prosecutor, needs to be brought in the cases of police misconduct?
I think that there needs to be a special prosecutor can work in conjunction with the DA, because the one advantage that the DA has is that she understands, or he, whoever it may be, understands law enforcement. I mean, I've spoken to attorneys that have never been at a crime scene before. I've spoken to attorneys that have only worked, in the courtroom for civil, litigation. So you need a special kind of DA and ADAs that understand law enforcement. You would have to have, my opinion was that having a special prosecutor there to define the actions and oversee the choices made to make sure that there is no police bias there, and that individual cannot be have any type of implied bias or prejudices that come into that position. If you understand what I'm saying, they have to basically be very balanced and very objective.
Okay. So my last question is this: when it comes to reform, what are the 3 things that you think, and from the list of 8, or that you just know off the top of your head and heart, that you think needs to be implemented to reform policing?
A good friend of mine, also a retired police officer, he's an assistant pastor at a church, Lloyd Scott, and you can search him on Facebook. He had a very phenomenal response regarding reform. I can't quote it verbatim because it's not an audition, but one of the things he said was that when it came to promotions within a division, that community leaders should have a say in that officer's promotion, and there should be more. And also, there should be more towards officers being assigned to divisions that reflect or represent their ethnicity. I can go back to I can go back to the summer of '91. I was working in a specialized unit, and this was after the Rodney King incident. And so it was interesting to see how the community, how the division that I worked, or actually I was part of a bureau, so the different divisions that I was in, the officers didn't reflect the community except for maybe one, and that was Southwest Division.
Okay.
So after the riots took place, they put an African-American captain at my division that I ended up at, Southeast Division. And it was the first African-American captain to be assigned to Southeast Division, which encompasses Watts, since the construction of that division back in '78. So there was a feeling of officers of different ethnicities that they felt, okay, this black captain isn't going to be fair to us, so they left. And when they left, a lot of black officers came in. Mm-hmm. And so when we would have entire watches where half, if not 2/3 of the watch were African American. And so the attitude and the line of communication changed within the community, even though it was after the riots, after '92, after all that smoke settled. There were the uses of force were reduced. Personnel complaints were reduced. I believe shootings were reduced within our division. And it was just because people in the community saw people that looked like them with the badge and the gun. And the unfortunate reality, that's not the same now. And so that's where you have that quote unquote, maybe ignorance of the community, because you don't come from the community, which may create fear and then friction. And
is there a way to institute that without it being perceived as racial bias? Where you
say that again? I didn't hear the beginning of your questions.
Is there a way to institute that? Is there a way to institute that where police officers police communities that they have a cultural literacy of? And we talked about this before. Is there a way to make this a rule or policy or law without it being, because on its face, I'm sure it probably sounds prejudicial. That said, it works. You just showed, an example where it works, where people who go into communities and people in those communities see people who look like them or who they know don't fear them. They have less fear. The officers have less fear because they understand the community, they understand the people in it, and so it works.
Well, and mind you, I, as far as a policy, a rule, a law, I don't know. I think it's just, I've worked with officers that were in just being specific, that were white, that went out of their way to do the best to understand the community that they worked in.
Right.
Whether it was taking one of our church clergy council members, because we have or one of our business boosters out to lunch and just have heartfelt conversations with them, trying to understand them as a business owner in a African American community, them living in an African American community. There are a lot of officers that actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some officers, because they have families, they don't have time to do that, on their own time, on their own dime. Right. Because of all the training that is mandated by the state of California now to add even more training. If it's necessary and someone can come up with a program, maybe you can help me with it. There might be something that can be instituted.
That's nice.
Well, I will say this, and if there's any of my former individuals of these, actually it's like 4 academy classes, early on in my career, because of some of the things that I was doing down in Southeast, a friend of mine who's an instructor at the academy invited me to come up for cultural diversity training. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, well, what do you want me to say? Because I'm a police officer. I don't live in Watts, but I've worked there. He says, just come up with anything you want. We're just trying to find something that works. So the creative side of my brain started working. So I was like, okay, give me a week's notice when, I have to come in. And, I'm going to come in and I want you guys to bring me in handcuffs. And you're going to introduce me as I'm kind of unshaven, slightly. You're going to introduce me as someone from the African American community. Mm-hmm. And so I was very antagonistic with they had questions for me and I was very antagonistic. I was respectful, but I basically made sure that there was a line drawn in the sand to see how these recruits were going to respond. Mm-hmm. And I'd say 95% of them responded properly, but there was 5% that out of that 5% got angry. At one time, this younger person of a different persuasion called me a boy, knowing the connotations with that. A few of them got red-faced and were ready to fight. But it just exposed to the instructors what they needed to work on. And then once it got after about a half an hour of this, and it got to almost a point of a climax, the instructors would say, hey, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and they would walk me out. Well, I would go downstairs, shave real quick, and put my Class A department uniform on with my badge and my gun and walk back in. And all of them were like, oh my God, because they couldn't see me as someone in blue, because most of them couldn't see me as, and then there's some of them that couldn't see me as a person like them. Right. And it showed them their biases, and it gave them an opportunity to, as I mentioned earlier, put the mirror in front of their face and take a good look at yourself. And that was part of the process of checking. That unfortunately, that only happened over like a 5-month period. And for some reason, the captains changed out, and that program was stopped. And I never got a chance to do it again.
That was absolutely brilliant. Okay, so I know I keep saying last question. When you're talking, things come up to me.
Erin, don't worry. I've been married 35 plus years.
You know how women
are. I get it.
Okay, tell your wife thank you for not letting me, but I'm glad she gave you the space to do this interview with me today. So in terms of hiring, because when you talked about that just came up in my spirit, because I've always wondered, is there some type of test where you find out, obviously to be a police officer, must be a stringent background check. Yeah. And is there a test on where you find out just their wherewithal, like mentally and emotionally, to see if these people are
I don't know if they still use the MMPI, which is a psych test. It's like 500 questions that's supposed to expose personality, character, and biases. But the bottom line is there a test that can question a person's heart? No. You can practice to take a test. If you know what they're looking for, you can put your guard up and hide it. It's just that, we recruit from the human race, and the human race is imperfect in all of its perfect ways.
What do you think needs to be done to get more representation in policing in terms of more African American police officers, more people joining the force, more women joining the force? Because I honestly believe as a woman that we wouldn't have as many of the problems as we do if more women were in the force.
Time out. That is very sexist of a statement.
Yes, and I still believe it.
Well, I've worked with a host of female partners in my career, and a lot of them were on point, and I would say would be the living definition of the consummate police officers. And then there were a few that were Jane Waynes, if you understand what I mean. You know who John Wayne was, so there was Jane Waynes. There were a few that brought their biases with them to work, i.e., you look just like my ex-boyfriend, so I'm gonna put hands on you because this is a domestic violence situation. Okay. So it's not fair to say if there was more women. Yeah, if there were more women, great. As long as they can do the job. I don't think that they're going to do a better job. They just need to be able to do the job.
I just think that women inherently have a different approach to things. And but you're right. Human beings are human beings. You're going to get some in every gender. But I think that if we had more women on the force, things would be better.
And I respect that opinion. And again, I'm not saying, all I'm saying is you're not a policeman, you're not a policewoman, you're a police officer. So abide by department policy, operate with some common sense. And I don't care what gender you are, just do the job, fair and equitable.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're going to end on that, but I want you to come back because I have more questions, and I want you to bring who you talked about bringing, and I want to interview them. Let's do videos. I want to go out and attend some of the events you were talking about. I want to support.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to it. No, don't just talk about it. Be about it. If you really want to do this,
I'm all about that life.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
I'm not.
I couldn't do right now in COVID because I'm sure there aren't these gatherings and stuff. But I definitely want to do an interview, and I definitely would love to go to an event and support. So now that you and I are
if I can get the coaches here at the lounge, because our VIP room is big enough to get the Watts Rams or the Watts Steels, and everybody has a mask, we're fine.
Okay, well, good. You know my number, Kevin. It's all you got to do is invite me. Okay, definitely. All right. Thanks
again for the opportunity.
I still have more, so you have to come back. We have to do a part 2. Okay.
Not a problem.
Okay.
I'm scared. Hey, I'm retired. I own a cigar lounge, and I'm enjoying life. So just I have the time. You let me know when you have the time.
You kind of teach me.
What? I didn't hear you.
I said I've never smoked a cigar, so maybe you kind of teach me. I'd like to learn.
Oops, somebody's calling you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, not a problem. We have something here called the Debonair Experience. You can find it on our website, to where you learn all about cigars and how to smoke them.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Well, I look forward to it, and we will talk again soon. Thank you so much.
You're more